Dave the Builder on KFM with Premier Timber Frame Homes, your expert guide to self-built homes. PremierTimberFrameHomes.ie.
Yeah, week 2 of our building slot. We do it each and every Thursday morning, just after 10:10. David McManus, Dave the Builder, is with us in studio from Premier Timber Frame Homes. Good to talk to you again, Dave. Thanks for coming in to us. Last week we kind of did a bit of an introduction about who you were, the business and the history behind setting up the company. Today we're going to jump straight into it then, and if people are looking to self-build their own house, how they can do it and what the first steps they need to do about getting that. So, I mean, before we talk about planning permission, which is probably the first thing that jumps to people's minds when they want to build their own house, you have to make sure that you have the funds there and that you've done your relevant saving.
Yeah, absolutely, Owen. I suppose when we talk about planning permission and finance, they flow into each other's category. So we'll work on both there this morning. So I suppose the first thing I would advise to do, I'm going to take a kind of a stereotypical couple. So we'll say John and Mary are roughly in their 40s and they have a site in County Kildare and they want to build a house. So my advice for their first steps would be, first of all, to maybe get to check the site, get someone to check the land. You might have to dig a few test holes and get a percolation test hole done. That'll cost you €500 or €700 in the region. Once you find out that the site itself is actually suitable to build a house on, then the next person to talk to would be your finance person, whether it be a mortgage manager or a broker or whoever it may be, you know.
I want to just pick up on the percolation there, because that actually ties in with a message that came in last week just when you finished up, and it was from Rachel and Sean in Donaghadee. They said, we live in a rural part of the country and our friends are looking at self-building not too far away from us. However, the ground is quite soft. What sort of foundations would be recommended for the ground if you knew that it was going to be quite soft? Because as silly as it sounds, they say their friends are terrified that the house is going to sink. So will it not get planning permission if the ground is overly soft?
Well, I suppose what I would say to them is would to get the percolation test done first. Now, even with soft ground, you still can build a house on it. There is many different ways many different foundation types that you can use. If the ground is soft, you can pile drive, you know, and that's kind of the most severe type of foundation, if you like. But you can also use what's called a slab foundation on softer ground. But I would recommend, if they are going to go ahead, to get the percolation test holes done first, and then when the engineer is out to do the percolation test holes, they would advise them on what foundation to use. Right.
So let's say then, let's go back to John and Mary here, our stereotypical couple. They have been, they've done the percolation test now. They know what the story is there. What's the next step they have to take?
So the next step would be get in contact with your finance manager or your mortgage manager and sit down and have a chat. Because what we see in our own company, and it's happened a few times in the past, is that we'll be putting through a set of architectural plans for, let's say, John and Mary, and you know, they're optimistic and everyone is kind of in a good form, and we want this and we want that, and that's all very important. But then the house becomes bigger than what they can afford, and we have got to the stage of putting through the plans, and then they get the price and they say, hold on a minute, we can't build this house. So that's why I'd say talk to the finance person first and find out what you can get based on your wages, you know. And I'm just going to leave this simple, a simple way of putting it. We'll say John earns 50,000 and Mary earns 50,000. So the generic kind of number for a first-time buyer, someone that didn't own the house before, is 4 times their salary. Ballpark, you know. And what they would need to kind of have in the bank then as well, they need to have about 10% of that themselves in the bank.
For the deposit then, that would be, would it?
That would be for the deposit, yeah.
Right.
Now, if you owned your own site, it can be used as a deposit also. So let's say if you were gifted or if you owned your own land, that can also be used as a deposit. But that's the kind of the mechanics of it that you might need to talk to with your own financial manager. Do you know?
Yeah, because Clodagh texted in 2 Mile House saying, my boyfriend and I have been weighing up our options on getting our own property for the last 18 months. We were always of the opinion that building your own home would be more expensive and more hassle than buying. But from listening to Dave last week and this morning, that doesn't seem to be the case. Does it really depend on the size of the house, the location when it comes to cost, and is everything different? You know, you don't want to give that answer of, well, it really depends how long is a piece of string, but the idea that building your own house is more expensive, is that the case?
In some cases it is, and it is it is one of the questions, you know, how long is a piece of string? If you're in the situation where you know, maybe your father was a builder, or you have, you know, a brother or whoever it may be, and who are in the industry, sometimes you can build a self-build cheaper than you can buy a house. Now, in saying that, as she just said, it might be easier. Building a house is not easy, you know, and there is headaches and heartaches involved in it. So in regards to buying a house, the house is built, you walk in the door and it's done, you know what I mean? So there is that luxury, but it's something that I'd advise her to research and talk to people who have already done that, you know, done a self-build. Talk to someone who has maybe bought a house and see what they think, because I know people in the past that have built houses and they would never build a house again. Really? Do you know what I mean? So it's just, you have to be of the mentality, you know, I'm going to do this. This is my dream home. I'm putting the next 2 years into this, and this is what we're going to do, and nothing's going to stop me. Yeah, you know what I mean?
The other thing that you mentioned last week that I thought was interesting is some people might be of that mindset and think, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to manage this myself. I know exactly what the house is going to look like, but they don't take into consideration then the added pressure of that. So one thing that they need to consider is, are they absolutely going to stick with it themselves, or do they need to bring in a project manager? Absolutely,
and it's something that they want to. It's something that they want to look into deeply before they start. You know, and you will see the shows like Room to Improve and Grand Design in the UK, where people with no construction background will embark on a self-build project, and I'm not saying, like, some houses might be easy, but it's not an easy task. I know, I'm building every day of the week, you know, the last 22 years, and it's not an easy task, and you will come into problems that, you know, you'll need someone that you're going to have to be able to talk to, you know.
And with the financing then, when you say speak to your finance person, is that maybe a broker, going to the bank, or would you have to look at getting a financial advisor then?
It's no harm in getting a financial advisor, and yes, you can go to your local bank or you can go to a broker. We have someone that we work with quite closely over the last couple of years. We find he's just brilliant, and he's real down to earth. He's actually undergoing a construction project himself at the moment, so he knows the ins and the outs of what people need. Do you know? That's Brian from EBS. And what I would say about a finance advisor, I remember I went to a finance advisor about 5 years ago, and funny enough, what he said to me at the time was he recommends his customers, when going on a self-build journey, to use timber frame, because I suppose when you think of building a house, you have a foundation, and if you have to get in block layers and get in all the different trades to get your house weather tight, there's quite a lot going on there. Whereas if you buy a timber frame house, you have a foundation there one day and you have a house there a couple of weeks later. Do you know what I mean? So for somebody building a self-build project, timber frame is definitely an easier way to go. What
I like about what you just said there is that when people contact you, you have people that you would recommend. Because I know when we got the house last year, we didn't build it ourselves, but it was kind of a rabbit in the headlights moment. I didn't know you had to contact this person, didn't know you needed to do X, Y and Z. So if people come to you, you can kind of guide them along that process, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, you know, different people that we work throughout the year, and we can... whether it be someone in the finance, as I say, if it's got to do with architectural or engineer, we're able to, we work with architects and engineers quite closely, and so on, right throughout the build. So we can kind of, especially if you're in Kildare, obviously being from Kildare, we know quite a lot of people around here.
Let's talk about planning permission then, and it's something that a lot of people will get bogged down on, and we probably won't get through everything this week, so we'll come back again next Thursday and talk about planning permission. But Francis and Richard in Rathangan were in touch saying, I know you're going to be touching on this morning. We're a slightly older couple and we're wondering how difficult is it to apply for planning permission. Would we be okay to do it ourselves, or is there help out there to guide us through the process? That comes back then to what I just mentioned. Can you help people through the planning permission process?
Yeah, so in our company we run a planning permission and a design service, So if John and Mary comes to me and says, David, okay, we're able to get 250,000 and we want to build a 3-bed bungalow in Rathangan, Kildare, and we will take their information and we can do a design and we can put the plans through to Kildare County Council. So that's a service that we offer, and sometimes we would recommend people to go to their local architect, because sometimes if we were a little bit further away than Kildare, they might know the lay of the land or the lay of the village a bit better than we would. So we would take all the information on board and we would recommend then based on that,
It's quite is it a lengthy process, a hard process, a bit of a pain in the neck for some people, planning permission? Because particularly I know a couple of people that didn't get it first time around, and that could be a huge setback.
Yeah, look, it is a bit of a pain in the neck, and I've heard people getting it, in 4 or 5 months, and I've heard people, waiting 4 or 5 years, and that's the reality of it. And I suppose I'm going to just touch on a few little things first that you should kind of be setting yourself up for. So the first one is there's kind of 4 stages to what you should know when you're going for planning permission. Obviously, the first one I've briefly touched on is the site suitability. So if you do have a site, you want to make sure that the land is good enough to put a house on. That's number one. If the land's not good enough, there's no point in going on to the rest of them. So the land has to be pretty good. The next one is you have to meet the category of local needs. So local needs is that you were born and reared, within 5 kilometres of where you want to build, So that might consist of, so once you're within that 5 kilometre zone, did you go, these are the kind of the questions that you'll need to answer. Did you go to school in the area? Are you working in the area? Now, working in the area isn't necessary, but it is a help. Mm-hmm. Are you farming, or do you have horses in the area? It's just trying to tie you to that area. Why do you need to live in that area? Do your kids go to school in the area? And a couple of other things is the site suitable for an entrance?
Yeah. So me as a Salons man, I can't infiltrate Alan Wood and say I'm going to move down. Now I could probably use the Granny rule and say that Granny Herbert and Granny Moore was from Alan Wood, but you know what I mean? You have to have that kind of link to it, so you can't just decide X is a lovely place, I'm going to throw a house up there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, unless you married someone from Alan Wood, and then of course that's the loophole there, yeah. But that's kind of basically it. I think there is another. I suppose when we're talking about planning permission, we're kind of talking about the rural parts of Ireland. Now, if you bought a site within the development area of Alan Wood, you could build in Alan Wood, so that would be in the 50 kilometre districts, where that would be kind of the residential building area.
Right, okay. What other steps have to be taken then when it comes to planning permission and getting the plans ready?
So getting the plans ready, I suppose the next topic out of all of those, so once you get your site suitability, your local needs, and the next one is the client's needs. So we would then sit down with the client and go through what the client needs and what the client wants, and we would get up a set of plans, and then we would sit down with them again a few weeks later and make sure that everything we go through the design thoroughly, and then just make sure, finally, before we send them through, check with the budget again.
That's very important. to cross-reference, because as you say, you don't want to be coming down the line and realising, oh, hang on a second, we're not going to be able to afford this, and then you're back to square one. We might leave the planning permission there. So we're going to leave it as though we've just sent in our plans now and we're looking for approval, refusal, etc. And we'll come back to that next week, because there's a couple more messages that came in to us. Kevin T in Kilteal folded in a little area. He wanted to ask you, just aside from this completely, about fire certs and fire safety, because when it comes to timber frame homes, what's the situation there? Are the fire certs the same?
Yeah, so basically, timber frame housing is up to building regulation, and that's important to know. There's two types of timber frame walls. So one will meet a 30-minute fire rating, and the other will meet a 1 hour fire rating. They're the two typical types of walls. So if you can imagine, even in some cases, I know people in the industry, like, there's extensive testing going on walls and roofs all the time to make sure that all the requirements are being met. So, you know, someone I spoke to a couple of days ago about fire, and they're in the timber frame industry. You know, if you think of a block, when a block heats up so much, comparing timber frame to block, when a block heats up so much, it starts to deteriorate in strength, whereas timber will actually hold its strength until it burns right through to the middle, you know, so you will get that hour rating or 30-minute rating that you need to get.
All right, John in Blessington has texted in as well saying, can you ask Dave, can you get planning permission if you already have a house? So if you already have a house, can you apply for and get planning permission?
Look, technically no. You know, technically no. Technically he'd have to sell his house, or, you know, now look, I'm not saying that people don't do it. I know of people that have houses and go for planning permission, but technically you're not supposed to.
Right, okay. Listen, we're going to come back to planning permission next week, because there's so much more to unpack on that. So we'll leave it there. Dave McManus of Premier Timber Frame Homes, thanks for joining us in studio. Remind us again quickly how people can get in touch with you if they want to.
So we're most active on Facebook, Premier Timber Frame Homes, and TikTok, Instagram would be Dave Premier Timber Frame Homes, and we also have a self-build WhatsApp group if anyone wants to get involved in that. And of course our email address is info@premiertimberframehomes.ie.
All right, super stuff. Dave, thanks a mil for joining us as always.
Dave the Builder on KFM with Premier Timber Frame Homes, your expert guide to self-built homes. premiertimberframehomes.ie.